Hi everyone, welcome back to Harp and Guitar, People and Music, and welcome back to another episode of Whiskey's Blues Gumbo, the show where we take strange and weird blues words or phrases and figure out what the heck they talking about. And today, I want to discuss the term, the slow drag. Now, what exactly is the slow drag? What are they referring to when they make mention of this? Now again, you hear this a lot in sort of older country blues or sort of right around the Second World War time period, just pre-war and just sort of post-war. Not so much post-war because then there was a lot of economic boom and there was a lot more people moving out of the rural areas and into the city centers. So you weren't seeing as many people going into like country juke joints out in the woods anywhere, but to have a good time on the weekends after working all week on the plantations or the farms. But you still, at that point, were hearing a little bit of this term called the slow drag. And what exactly is a slow drag? It's actually a type of dance. See, there was a problem in the turn of the last century, right around the 1900s or so, where the African-American migrant workers and the slaves were forbidden to do a lot of stuff. And this goes right back to the very beginning of the slave trade in the New World, where they were forbidden or prevented from doing a lot of their own traditional celebrations, like playing drums, percussive instruments, for example, and celebrating through song and dance. And this was because the plantation owners were under the false impression that the slaves could organize an uprising and revolt against their slave owners and their captives if they were permitted to play drums or congas or any of these percussive instruments. And if they were able to engage in any sort of large gatherings and celebrations. There was a fear that there would be an uprising. So they weren't allowed to play drums. They weren't allowed to perform certain dances even. And that's where the slow drag comes in. Because the African Americans at this time were very clever and they were able to get around this sort of forbidden practice of celebrating through dance. So what they stopped doing was stomping their feet and really moving around a lot, and they started shuffling or dragging their feet to music that they were creating. And this eventually, in the 1920s and 30s, became a popular dance known as the slow drag. Now, there was also the shuffle and the shimmy and the butt shake. These are all actual names of actual dances from the 20s and 30s, especially in blues and jazz. But the slow drag was a little different. See, there was always parties going on Friday nights and Saturday nights out at juke joints, whether they were far off in the country or whether it was a blues club in the big city. This was the time that the migrant workers, the African Americans, would unwind at the end of a hard work week. It was usually on a Saturday night, because really they only had the Sunday off, and this was so that they could go to church. And after that, basically, they would eat a meal and get ready to get back to working on the plantations on Monday again. So really Saturday night was the only time that they could sort of cut back and let loose. So in the early parts of the evening and throughout as the night progressed, they would do all of these dances like ball and the jack and the shimmy and the butt shake and the shuffle and all of these. But once the sun went down and it got to be around about midnight or so, that's when the slow drag would kick in. That's when either the musician or musicians performing at the juke joints or the clubs would actually slow down the tempo of the music. And it was basically a way of doing a really sexually charged slow dance, where the dance partners, the man and the woman, would dance close together. They would have their pelvic areas, their fronts of their bodies, their torsos, and their pelvises right up against each other, and they would put their arms around each other, much like a high school slow dance, right? A high school waltz, if you will, that how you danced as a kid in school dances. But they would actually sort of do it a lot more erotically, right? They would gyrate their hips and basically grind against one another. And again, they would just drag their feet. They wouldn't perform dance steps, whether they were faster dance steps or slower dance steps, because, there was still this sort of leftover restriction, this sort of idea of restricting dance movements and celebratory activities was still kind of left over from an earlier time. And as a result, these types of dances became popular. So it still used a lot of the older aspects where you don't move your feet around and do a lot of what is very obviously overt dancing. They would just shuffle or drag their feet, but still gyrate their bodies to the music and to the tempo and the beat of what they were listening to or dancing to. So that's what became known as the slow drag. It was basically a sensual, sexy, sort of gyrating dance where they would shuffle their feet rather than stomping or dancing their feet around. So it was just as exciting, it was just as erotic, but you know, it was a little bit more on the down low because they were still adhering to some of the older ideas of not moving their feet when they danced. They were dragging their feet. So hence the term, the slow drag. So there you go. Pretty easy one here today. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and of course if you have any questions or comments or come across any strange blues terms, let us know down in the comments, and we'll try to figure it out for you and see what they're talking about. In the meantime, if you haven't already, please like, share the video, let us know what you think, and subscribe, of course. And in the meantime, we'll talk to you again real soon. Have yourselves a great day, and thanks for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.